a comprehensive look at trends, fund profiles, and more in Exploring ETFs.
Hi everyone, welcome to Exploring ETFs. I'm Neena Mishra, and today we are talking about Bitcoin and blockchain ETFs. And we don't have a Bitcoin ETF yet in the US, but it could be coming very, very soon, maybe this month. So let's talk about them. So looking at Bitcoin, it is currently trading over $57,000 and it has been very volatile, but it is still up over 95% year to date. Remember that it had surged to over 63,000 in April, then it plunged to 30,000 and then it started rising again. And now companies like Tesla, MicroStrategy, they hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And El Salvador recently started accepting Bitcoin as legal tender. Its market capitalization now exceeds $1 trillion. So love them or hate them, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are here to stay. That said, there is no Bitcoin ETF approved yet in the US. Canada has approved several Bitcoin ETFs. Starting this year, they have Bitcoin as well as Ether ETFs, and they all are trading smoothly. They are doing what they are supposed to do. And in fact, some of the US ETFs can hold some of these Canadian ETFs. We will take a look at one blockchain ETF which holds Canadian Bitcoin ETF, and Cathy Wood's ARK ETF also have the ability to add Canadian Bitcoin ETF. Now, Europe has several cryptocurrency ETFs. They had approved crypto ETFs, ETPs, exchange traded products, and they are all trading smoothly. In fact, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal recently that 8 of 10 best performing ETPs in the world are European-based ETPs that track cryptocurrencies. These include exchange-traded products or ETPs that track Binance, Ether, and Ripple. Overall, over 3.4 billion has flowed into global crypto ETFs, ETPs this year, and that has pushed their assets to over $9.2 billion. Now, in the US, there is no Bitcoin ETF yet. So how can investors invest in cryptocurrencies? So most of us buy cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ether, others directly on platforms like PayPal, Coinbase, and Robinhood. If you want to hold cryptocurrencies in your brokerage accounts or retirement accounts, then obviously you have to look at funds like GBTC. But the problem with GBTC and other such similar funds, they track like closed-end products. So that is why they don't behave like ETFs. ETFs, they trade very close to their net asset values, whereas these closed-end funds like GBTC can trade at a significant discount or premium to their NAVs. So they do not track Bitcoin prices very well. Then in the US, the SEC recently approved Bitcoin futures tracking mutual funds. And there are at least 3 Bitcoin futures tracking mutual funds in the US now, but they haven't seen much interest from investors because investors like ETFs because of their transparency, their tax efficiency, and also they are very convenient to trade. So investors would really prefer a Bitcoin tracking ETF. In fact, there was a survey recently by Fidelity which revealed that 44% of investors would want a Bitcoin ETF that can be easily held in their brokerage or retirement accounts. Now, since there is no Bitcoin ETF, there are many blockchain ETFs. Blockchain is the technology that underpins cryptocurrencies. So this is an indirect way of getting exposure to Bitcoin. And these ETFs have been launching, but again, there are two ETFs that we are talking about today that have gathered significant amount of assets. Others are relatively new, or they haven't seen much interest from investors. Now, in the US, it has been 8 years since Winklevoss twins first applied for a Bitcoin ETF. That application was denied by the SEC, and since then, many ETF providers have applied for Bitcoin or Ether ETFs, and the SEC continues to deny them. As I mentioned, they recently approved futures-based mutual funds, and recently they approved a crypto industry revolution and tech ETF by Volt. The ticker symbol would be BTCR. This would be something like a Bitcoin Lite ETF, because this would provide exposure to companies that have a lot of Bitcoin. So companies like MicroStrategy, Marathon Digital Holdings, and Bitforms. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we may see a Bitcoin ETF very soon. It could be launched this month, but it is not what exactly investors want. Investors generally prefer products that hold physical commodity. Like in case of gold, we have seen products like GLD and IAU, which physically hold the commodity gold. They are very popular with investors, and they track the the price of gold very, very closely. Whereas futures-based gold ETFs haven't seen much interest from investors. Now, the SEC chair, Gary Gensler, he recently indicated that he prefers futures-based Bitcoin products. So that is why investors are optimistic that a futures tracking Bitcoin ETF may launch soon. Now, futures-based product, according to his logic, his argument, they provide more investor protection because futures trade on the CME, and they are regulated by CFTC. But the problem with futures-based products is that futures have to be rolled over, and rollover involves costs because of contango issues. So whenever you buy futures which are expiring later and sell futures which are expiring very soon, it incurs costs, and these costs could be 10% or more in addition to the expense ratio. And Bitcoin futures-based product may not track Bitcoin prices very well. So this is not really what investors want, but it seems that we are still many months away from a physically backed Bitcoin ETF. And I would quickly add one more point, that in case of commodities, investors prefer physically backed commodity ETFs. In case of, but there are several commodities like oil, natural gas, agricultural commodities, which cannot be physically backed because it is very expensive to actually hold oil or natural gas. So in those cases, investors have to rely on futures tracking ETFs. Now, since there is no Bitcoin ETF, let's take a look at two blockchain ETFs that provide indirect exposure to Bitcoin. So the first one we are talking about is by Amplify. It is the oldest and the most popular blockchain ETF. It is called Amplify Transformational Data Sharing ETF. The ticker symbol is BLOK. It provides exposure to companies developing and utilizing blockchain technologies. It is actively managed, which makes a lot of sense in this space, which is evolving, changes fast. So that is why this product has been quickly able to gather assets. It has over 1.2 billion in assets as of now, and charges 71 basis points in expense ratio. Now, the second one that I'm highlighting is also one of the oldest. This also launched around the same time as the Amplify product. It is called Siren Nasdaq Next Gen Economy ETF, ticker symbol BLOK. This is an index tracking ETF. It uses certain fundamentals to select and weight its holding, slightly cheaper, but also much smaller. Now, looking at the performance, you will see that the Amplify product is up over 90% over the past year, whereas the other product, other blockchain ETF has delivered performance which is pretty similar to the S&P 500 ETF. Now let's take a look at these ETFs and their holdings by going to the quote pages on Zacks.com. So let's first take a look at the Amplify ETF. As I mentioned, Amplify Transformational Data Sharing ETF, ticker symbol BLOK. You can read our article, and I in fact did a podcast with the provider. You can listen to that podcast, and also you can go to the external homepage and see what it exactly holds. So some of these holdings are what you would expect in an ETF like this: MicroStrategy, Marathon Digital, PayPal, Square, Coinbase, Nvidia, all companies either working on blockchain technologies or involved with blockchain in some way. And I had mentioned earlier that this ETF also holds some Canadian Bitcoin ETFs. So you see them over here: EBIT, CoinShares Bitcoin ETF, Purpose Bitcoin ETF. So an indirect way of getting exposure to those Canadian Bitcoin ETFs. Now, the second one, which we had talked about, is BLCN by Siren Nasdaq. And again, to learn more, you can go to the external homepage and see what it holds. So you will see companies like Silvergate, MicroStrategy, Overstock, IBM, JP Morgan Chase, Signature Bank, PayPal, and others. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out zacks.com/promo for an interesting offer, and also make sure to subscribe to our videos, our video channel, so that you do not miss anything. And I will see you next week.